Hey everybody, welcome to episode 63 of FoundersGyan, and thanks for tuning in. Our guests this week are Krishnan, Nair and Sneha Jain, the founders of GeekTrust.in, and our topic for the day is hiring for startups, and you can find the show notes over at foundersgyan.com/EP63, where you can find links to all that we talk about on the show. Are you ready? Here we go. Sneha Jain and Krishnan Nair, welcome to the show. Super glad and super excited to be speaking with you guys today. So, Krishnan and Sneha are the founders of GeekTrust.in. It's a company that helps technical people understand where they stand in the job market. It helps them explore various jobs without committing to actually searching for a job. So maybe you guys could just introduce yourself and talk a little bit more about the company.
Yeah, so I'm Krishnan. I used to work with software services company called ThoughtWorks for about 10 years. I was in the US for about a couple of years before coming back to Bangalore. And at some point in my career, I realized that if I just want to explore what my job prospects are, it's super hard. It's not easy, right?
Right.
You need to create your resume, you need to go send it out to folks.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the seed of GeekTrust started. There should be a way for you to just understand what your job options are.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the seed of GeekTrust. Help empower technologists, help them understand what their options are. And whenever you decide to change your job, it should be super easy to do it. So that's the idea.
So hi, I'm Sneha, and I've mostly been in Bangalore, and right after my engineering I joined ThoughtWorks as a software developer. Post that, I played various roles at ThoughtWorks like business analysis and a bit of project management. That's how I know Krishnan from the ThoughtWorks days. And after spending 6 years at ThoughtWorks, I was looking to see if I can do something different. And that's when I found it really hard to figure out which other company would be interested in hiring me without being fully into the job market, or even see what our companies are there out which are doing interesting work. And that's when I used to meet Krishnan, and we realized that it cannot be so hard to find your next job, or it should not be so hard to figure out what are the interesting companies out there. So that's where the whole concept of GeekTrust started. It's been a year since we are fully up and live.
But so how do you enable people to search for a job without searching for a job?
Yeah, so what GeekTrust as a platform provides, and right now it's only for technologists, so you can explore the job market in anonymity. And by explore, what we mean is you can figure out which companies would be interested in hiring you just based on how good your technical skills are. You could also figure out what you could potentially earn in the market today. And we're trying to do this by changing how recruitment works a little bit today, which is trying to get this concept in which is called your code is your resume. So instead of trying to build your resume, what we're trying to say here is prove your technical skills, and just based on that, companies will approach you. You don't need to even update your resume.
Great. So now our topic for today is hiring for startups and the questions related to that. Now, a lot of people say that hiring for a startup is completely different from a normal corporate hire. So, in your experience, could you tell us why it is?
Sure. So I think the number one thing is startups expect a lot from the candidates, right? And it's not just in terms of your skill set, it's also in terms of your commitment. Startup hiring, you're looking for people who are willing to A, multitask, B, treat the company as your own, right? And the level of commitment that you expect is much more than any regular enterprise or corporate job would expect. So I think that's the number one thing. Expectation from your hire is probably superhero level.
Another important thing in also what we've figured out is for your employee or your hire to believe in your idea. And it becomes more important because at a startup you end up doing multiple things. Right. Yes, my core talent is probably writing code, but I'll have to end up doing marketing events, finance, operations.
Right.
And if you fundamentally believe in the startup, believe in the idea, there's a lot more flexibility. So that is also something slightly different from a regular hiring, I would say.
And since you guys are into recruitment space, kind of indirectly, let me pose this question out to you. Now, it's all fine and well and good for companies to expect a superstar from the hire or the candidate, but what are companies doing to reciprocate the same, right? So if I'm joining a startup, and the company expects me to believe in the idea, multitask, and so on, a lot of companies, there are a few companies which do offer stock options and things like that, but a lot of other companies just play on the fact that, okay, it's a good learning experience and leave it at that. So what is your opinion on that? Do you think it's fair, unfair?
So primarily anybody in their life, they want to be satisfied,
right,
and they want to feel that they're contributing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is true for your work environment as well. If you look at Daniel Pink's Drive, the book, he talks about that as well, right? Fundamentally, you want to be part of successful teams building and making an impact. And that is what a startup gives you.
Right, okay, great. So let's talk about what are the so now this topic is going to be mostly for the benefit of our listeners, mostly going to be from a company's perspective of hiring the right people, right? And we will also try to touch on the things that candidates can do in order to equip themselves to get hired better. So let's talk about the things to do. So let's split it into two parts. What should companies do in terms of hiring good people, and what should employees do? I keep getting confused. What should employees do to get hired into good startups?
Yeah. So in terms of things to do for a startup who's looking to hire good tech talent, one of the things that we've seen working really well is to engage really well with the candidate, with a prospective candidate. And in our experience running GeekTrust for the last 1 year, we've seen that there are a lot of good companies who immediately call a candidate, engage them, get them to the office, have a face-to-face conversation, and also close the whole interview process and give them an offer in 3 days. There are also companies who do it in one single day. And what we've seen is when the candidate's experience has been good and they feel engaged, there's high chances of them accepting the offer immediately as well.
And you won't believe how poorly a lot of companies do this. Some of this is basic hygiene, right? You get a candidate's profile and it's a good profile. The candidate is expecting you to call, and sometimes startups take 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's worse than a corporate, right? I mean, corporates do exactly the same thing. I mean, so do you still see this mistake a lot of startups do? Because corporates are known not to respond back to the candidates. If you appear for an interview and you're not selected, either you will get a template that, okay, we'll get back to you and that's it, or they don't even reach out to you.
So I think the reasons are different. In startups, the main reason why most of them don't or are not able to do it is because there is so much for them to do and they don't have the bandwidth for this. But we feel it's basic hygiene. If you value hiring, if you value people, you should engage, and you'll see the impact immediately.
Right. There's no. I don't think it's a valid excuse, right? That there's so many things to do. I mean, you've got a person on the call or in front of you, and you have spent time with him. The person has taken time out to appear for your whatever. He's prepared, not prepared, doesn't matter. He's taken time out, and I think this excuse of not having time is not good. And now let's talk about from a candidate's perspective. What should a potential candidate do in order to get hired into a good startup or build their technicals? What should be the approach?
Right. I think number one thing is a lot of candidates treat the interview process a little flippantly. Basic thing is to read up about the company.
Right.
Be genuinely interested in knowing about the company. Right. It's not just hitting the company's website, figuring out the domain, what are they trying to build, reading up a little bit about the company and the founders. And the second thing is most interviews today are not about, hey, can you write this SQL for me? Because it doesn't matter. With Google and Stack Overflow, you have those options.
Right.
What companies want to know is, how did you do in your job so far? Why did you do the things you did? And what initiative have you shown? So as a candidate, it's very simple really. Just be clear about what you have done. Go back and think about, okay, I built this architecture. What was my thinking process behind it? And be ready to explain that to your panel.
Right. I think companies are not interested in the solution per se. It's the thought process behind the solution. I think they're more interested in. So
well put.
That's a great point. So any other points in terms of what companies need to do? One is the basic hygiene, getting back to the candidate, what else can they do?
So one other thing is it's really important to be transparent. So somebody at a startup level would join your startup for a couple of things. One is they believe in your idea, and the second thing is that they're trying out something so risky because they want to see the impact of it.
Right.
So when a candidate or a hiree has put in so much effort or trust into your startup, I think it's fair to reciprocate with transparency. And when we say transparency, that could mean anything from what does your bank balance look like now, or how stable is the company, and how are you planning to scale this up. And it's always, I think, better to undersell or just put your facts right instead of overselling, because it's just going to cause more issues. You oversell and then that person's not happy, and then you need to go through the whole problems of what you sold before.
Yeah, it's better the person does not join than join and leave in a week's time, because you have oversold and they come in and they see the reality.
Right, and I believe this works both ways, right? I mean, even candidates should be transparent with potential hires. If you're joining because of stock options, I think you should say so, right?
Correct.
You should say so that, okay, I'm taking a risk here, but I believe that the company will do well, and hence I want stock options. I think it's better to say it upfront, right?
Exactly, and it's a fact that it's a candidate's market. Right. If you're good with something, so companies know that it's not just about, hey, you like me and therefore I'm joining. So candidates also should be upfront saying, hey, I'm getting so much at this company now. I like what you're doing, so I'd like you to at least match it.
Right.
If you can beat it up, great, but at least set that expectation upfront, then lead the company on.
Right. Okay. And anything else an employee?
So just to add to that, at the same time, there's also a trend in the market which is, I feel, it may not even be ethical to accept an offer letter from a company and then shop around with other companies, just saying that this company's offered me this and so on.
Right.
So while you should definitely explore all the options before you make your choice, but you should not use that as a blackmailing or to get a better offer from some other company.
Right.
And a lot of people also accept an offer and then don't join. So explore, take all your time, but once you accept, stick to it.
Right.
We tell our candidates, don't accept an offer till you're comfortable with it. Shop around before.
Right.
But when you tell a company that you are going to join,
keep your word.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Of course. I mean, obviously, if a company offers you a letter and then later on they say, sorry, we found somebody else. It's not even the job is no longer there. We can't afford you. It's like we found somebody better than you. I mean, the candidate will obviously be pissed, right?
Correct.
So I think that's a valid point. Companies do look at 10 different candidates. You are not the only one, right? So you are also free to look at 10 different companies. But once you do the handshake, whatever, sign the contract, then you should honor the commitment. Yes. Okay, great. And anything else that employers should do in order to?
Yeah. So it's also a lot of the times when you're trying to hire, at least, and this is what we followed at GeekTrust as well with our first few hires.
And it's true for startups in general, I think. Not necessarily big companies, but startups.
Is be clear about why you're doing certain things. So that why is across everything, across operations or your core idea of why you started up or what's your product about. Because if somebody understands the why clearly, then it ties to them being sold about your startup. They understand your idea.
It connects with you at a level higher than a transactional level.
So don't most companies and startups do this already?
I don't think startups even know why they do what they do.
Okay, so that's a bigger problem, right? I think they should go back and find out why they are doing what they are doing.
And the why that we are talking to actually goes much higher. So it could be a very, very generic why, but that's like the principle of why the startup even exists today.
Okay, that's a good point. Now, I just want to digress a little bit and let's talk about your own journey. Now, you guys had this idea, okay, why you said why, so let's use a play on words. So you are saying, why was there not a service where I can shop around or look around what options are available? And so you guys, how did you guys come up with this concept specifically, with this particular concept? I mean, you obviously had a question, but how did you decide that, okay, the way to go about is to have some coding coding. What do you call
Coding
it?
challenges.
Coding challenges. Yes,
Yeah.
coding challenges, and companies can kind of pick from those coding challenges. So candidates are free to come and do coding challenges, and the companies can pick the best of the coders.
Right.
So how did you arrive at this idea?
Right. I think two emotions at play here. The first emotion is that of fear. Job market is intimidating, right? When you want to look out for a job, from the process of putting your resume out to getting, being in a power equation at a panel where, they hold all the power. So there is fear there.
Right.
So number one thing we said is let's get the fear out of the way, right? Looking out for a job should not be so intimidating. That's where we came in with the idea of let people explore. So there's no commitment. You're not
Right.
promising a company I'm joining you, but allow them the chance to explore and understand. Second emotion in play is fun. Right? Technologists, nobody wants to create a resume.
Right.
But our problems, our latest coding challenge is based on cricket. The previous was on Bangalore traffic. So technologists enjoy solving interesting problems. So we focus on building interesting problems. And we figured that if we combine the two, we may have a product that works. Right? And we are too early to say that this works, but that's the reason why we came up with that. Right? So fear, let's figure out how to reduce that and make it a fun process.
I did see one of the challenges, the Bangalore traffic challenge. I haven't seen the cricket challenge. So who builds these, and how is it kind of approved or agreed upon that these can be used as benchmarks? So obviously each company will have their own way of looking at the code that the developer writes, but what's the process that you do to kind of build these challenges and agree and let companies agree that we will use the codes written on these challenges for evaluation?
That's a very good question.
Yeah, so all our coding challenges are in-house. So we come up with the concept, right from the concept till the end execution, we come up with the coding challenges. We discuss quite a bit internally, we try to solve it ourselves, and then when we think, this is right, this tests all the things that we want to test, we push it. Now, coming to the second part of the question as to, how do we make sure that companies will also value this evaluation or value this code?
Right.
So what we test at GeekTrust, all our coding challenges, just the fundamentals of how good are your fundamentals of software development. And there are a few things that fall into the fundamentals, like is your code readable? Is your code structured in a way that somebody else can read it and build on top of it? Because mostly in production or when you build an actual product, what is most important is your code should be extendable to build more features on it, and it shouldn't just break down.
Right.
And somebody else should also look at the code and quickly understand and then pick up from there. So there are a few parameters that we look at which test the fundamentals.
Right.
And when we come up with a coding challenge, one thing to ensure is it covers all these parameters.
Right.
If you like this show, do follow us on Facebook and Twitter. The link is www.facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan. Both these provide you daily tips and articles as well as resources to help and inspire your startup. There are multiple tips per day. Some examples of these tips would be articles on the latest startups, growth hacking tips, how do you build team for startups, how to get funding, etc. So don't forget facebook.com/FoundersGyan and twitter.com/FoundersGyan.
Right. So I think that's a great tip for people looking to for developers and technologists looking to join startups and just about any company, or even build your own product. Right. I think you have given some great tips there that it should be easy to maintain. It should be easy. It should be reusable. Basically, I would say object-oriented programming. The principles of object-oriented programming, which many people don't do. They just start coding like writing an essay. So I think it's a great tip. But I think still the question that I asked was slightly different. It was is it that the challenge in itself doesn't matter? Challenge X could be replaced by challenge Y, and companies are okay with it, or do companies look at, say, for example, Bangalore traffic challenge could be around, say, shortest path algorithm or something like that, So, is there something else apart from all these coding standards and things like that? Is there something else that companies and GeekTrust has in agreement that a coding challenge should cover in concept these these things, right? Not the output of it,
right?
Not what the developer actually submits, right?
Yeah.
But the concept of the challenge itself.
So when we sign up, there are two parts to this answer. The first part is when we sign up companies, we make it explicit that these are the 10 parameters we look for, right? If this is in line with what you're looking for, let's work together, right? And that solves a lot of problems because what we consider good code, the companies also consider good code. And there are certain companies which tell us, hey, I don't care as much about this. I care about algorithm or something specific in detail. I want people who can do analytics, data analytics, for instance. And we end up not working with those companies for now. So we try and build a basic denominator that all these companies value the fundamentals of, like you said, object-oriented programming. That's one part to it. Second part to it is, in these 10 parameters, some companies tell us, hey, we really are interested in people who has strong OOP skills, right? I want people, I'm building a product for the next 20 years. I want people who do proper encapsulation, they have good interfaces. So they call out certain parameters and say, only send me code which is exceptional in these two parameters. So that's how we engage with companies.
But otherwise, the problem itself is agnostic. So that's why we keep coming up with new problems.
Right.
As long as they test the fundamentals, the problem can keep changing.
Right. So in your funnel, the customer or the developer comes in, he writes the code and he submits it, and then you evaluate it and you kind of funnel it to the companies that you think meets the parameters set, is it?
Yeah, so we give basic feedback to the developers on their code, and if they clear our evaluation, then they come on the platform as a member. So they are a GeekTrust member. And once they are a member, then companies start pitching to them based on their code, based on their profile, anonymous profile. And the developer can then choose to say, oh, this company sounds interesting and I want to proceed with them. And that's the only point where a developer's contact details are shared outside.
So you don't actually send it to any company. So the companies will look at the code and say, okay, I want this candidate or this candidate, is it?
So it's that is the vision. So right now it's in progress. The company's product or the app is in progress. So once that is out, they can do that completely.
Okay.
Right now it's a mix of us. Also sometimes checking with the company saying, hey, this code looks like you might be interested in this. Do you want to pitch to this candidate?
So the vision is like, correct me if I'm wrong, as I understand it, a developer would submit a code and then your platform would evaluate on say XYZ parameters and say a candidate is strong in this much percentage or whatever number.
Right.
Yeah.
This is like slightly weaker, kind of give a evaluation of the candidate, and companies, if they want, they can take a deeper look at the actual
Exactly.
code.
Yeah. So they can download the code or they can review it, and then if they like it, they can connect with the candidate. So
Okay.
it's the grand vision is it's a marketplace where good technologists and good companies can interact, and based on validated technical skills as well as the interest they have in the company.
Okay. Right.
So I was saying the analogy that we like to use sometimes is like architects can showcase what work they have done. We believe technologists can also showcase the work.
Right.
Then a company can say, hey, I like the way this guy does windows or balconies. Therefore, that's important for me. Let me go figure it out.
Right.
Similarly, on GeekTrust, companies will be able to say, hey, this guy's algorithm skills look great, but OOPS is not great, but I want algorithms, so let me talk to this guy. So that's the vision, like Sneha had said.
Right, very nice. Okay, I think we have digressed too much on this. So let's come back to the topic on hand. Let's talk about things to avoid, and also it would be interesting to hear some real life examples, about things you have seen, that would make it like even bit more interesting for us, So let's talk about things to avoid while hiring for startups.
So I think the number one mistake that we have seen people make is startups. Some startups tend to check if the candidate knows what I know, right? They tend to check if as a startup I know XYZ. Does the candidate also know XYZ?
In the sense, give us an example.
Example would be this is the way the current product I'm working on is in Ruby, and I recently faced this challenge in Ruby, and this is how I solved it. Now I'm going to test the candidate if they will solve it in the same fashion.
Testing a candidate on a Ruby production problem.
That they faced, whereas the candidate their skills lie elsewhere.
Right.
So while I pick that specific example, the abstraction of that is check for the candidate's strengths. Too many startups check for the weakness, right? They're trying to poke holes.
Right.
Whereas you should always be looking out for what does this candidate bring to the table for us that will add value to us. Like we were saying earlier, it's not rocket science; it's basic hygiene. But it's surprising the number of companies that don't do this well enough. I'll give you another example, right? We have both worked at ThoughtWorks, and in ThoughtWorks, Agile and XP is very important. So test-driven development is important for ThoughtWorks. So for some companies, they look for candidates who write code in a test-driven development manner. Whereas they may not have been exposed to this at all, and therefore they don't do it.
Right.
Their strengths lie elsewhere. Their strengths might lie in scaling systems to handle 1 million transactions. But candidates, startups lose up on that because they're not even explored that.
Right.
That's the number one mistake.
Right. So isn't that a bit of a problem? Because if I'm building a startup and I'm looking for a person who can do X, Y, Z, but it's not a match. I mean, the person might be good, but is doing something else.
Right.
Isn't that a match? Isn't that a mismatch?
The trick with startups is, right, you might be doing X, Y, Z today. Tomorrow you'll be doing ABC. You can't hire for X, Y, Z. Doesn't work that way.
Right.
So you need to find people who have the potential to do other things as well. Right. We started off being a Node.js app. Today we are in Golang. Right. So it's very difficult. You shouldn't be hiring for X, Y, Z. If you know X, Y, Z, you should be doing it. Right.
And the two things are also not very different. So for example, if you're looking to hire a software developer, you would not say that you hire a completely different role or a designer.
Right.
So it's not that contrast, but as long as the fundamentals are good, they're a good software developer, you should be looking at their strengths and not trying to pick their weaknesses.
Right. Okay. I think that's a good lesson for startups. So any other things that startups do that should be avoided while hiring?
Yeah. So one thing that we've noticed again is there are a lot of hardcore tech startups doing really interesting work, but they're nowhere to be heard of or nowhere to be seen in the market. And there are small things. That doesn't mean that you go put billboards or spend a lot of money on marketing, but there are small things that you could do to just make yourself more visible. One of the things being having a nice, decent, clean website. A lot of the startups don't even have a website because when you're looking to hire somebody, the first thing somebody would do is go Google for your startup or search for your startup, and there should be some presence online. So a website is one thing. Just being present in technical events. There are a lot of events that happen in Bangalore and across India. Attending some of them or having some of your good developers speak at those events, or even
writing blogs.
You may be doing very interesting stuff at your startup. Just write about it and people might know you better just reading those blogs. So,
let's talk about your worst entrepreneurial moment and the lessons you guys learned from it in your own GeekTrust. One of you can take it, or if
okay. So this is from very personal to us, and we want GeekTrust to be like she was saying, a profitable startup, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, sometimes early in your journey you land meetings with people who can influence you significantly, right? And at that moment you're not prepared for it, right? Being unprepared for meetings, I think, is the biggest mistake that we have done in the past. So we had a chance to meet a really good investor when we were not looking for money at all, and we were woefully underprepared for it, right? And now it's difficult to go back to the same investor and say, hey, now we have proved our concept, we want to build the next version out.
Now we are prepared.
Yeah. So as much as you would love to sit and build your product out, it's important to think about how you position, because you never know who's going to knock on your door next and ask you, hey, what's GeekTrust? So being underprepared is a lesson that we have had.
Right. So I think the lesson here, thanks for sharing that. It's a very personal thing. I'm sure it's bringing back some hard emotions for you guys. So thanks for sharing that. And I think it's always like good to be completely prepared and at all times know exactly your elevator pitch and whatever questions an investor can ask, because
or rather, don't shut any doors too soon. You never know when you'll need what. So that's what the lesson is.
Okay, cool. So now let's talk about some action items for startups to take in terms of hiring. What are the things that, as a result of listening to this interview, you would like startups to kind of do, or it's your advice. I mean,
Sure,
it's
sure.
not like they have to do this, but in your opinion, these are the things that they need to do in order to get like good candidates and jumpstart their startups also.
Right. So I think I would divide this into advice for early stage startups and advice for a little bit more stabler startups. For early stage startups, my advice is, and I'm not selling ourselves at all here, don't use platforms. Don't rely completely on recruitment consultants. Early stage startups, you need to go out there, you need to go talk at conferences, meet people, write about your own startup. Nobody is going to do that work for you. You have to do it yourself. Right. There's no magic pill in this, right?
Right.
If you write about your, if you just give it to a recruitment consultant, they will not be able to sell it the way you can.
Correct.
So early stage startups depend less on platforms is my advice. You're lucky if you get something, but you have to go out there. There are a lot of events.
Right.
For startups which are in the second mode, which is they are either revenue generating or they are funded or they're reasonably stable, platforms like GeekTrust work well, right? And full transparency, there are platforms like HasJob or AngelList also which work out reasonably well for candidates. With GeekTrust, what we are trying to do for startups which are stable are that we're trying to reduce or increase the conversion rate of candidates. Right? I used to work at ThoughtWorks, and when I was hiring there for my teams, I looked at 2,000 profiles to hire about 15 people. That was the typical conversion rate the recruitment teams in ThoughtWorks had. And that's about 5%. Right? We want to bring it up to like 20 to 30%. Out of 3 profiles you get from a platform like GeekTrust, you should be able to hire 1. So that's our goal. So look for late stage startups, look for platforms because you don't have a lot of time that give you quality profiles. So that's the fun.
So thanks for that. And I think one of the questions, so obviously there are multiple platforms. So I think one of the key questions startups should ask is, one, is this platform right for me? And number 2, what is the conversion rate that I will get in using this platform? Right? I think that's a key question.
A lot of platforms are built for enterprises and for scale. So their value proposition is really, I'll give you 1,000 profiles this week. If you're a startup founder and you're doing so many things, 1,000 profiles a week doesn't help you.
Right.
You need 2 good profiles,
Correct.
out of which 1 will hopefully convert.
Great. Can you recommend any books or resources in terms of hiring or building a platform like yours, or just general startup? What are your recommendations?
So I can talk about 2 of my favorite books. One has been Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz. So that is a fairly big book, but it gives you a very good insight into running a startup, hiring, and all the difficult decisions that you end up taking as a startup founder.
Right.
So in fact, I read that just when I started, and I thought that was really helpful. And my other favorite book is Marketing a Love Story. It's a very, very short book, a small book. You can read it maybe on a flight from Bangalore to Bombay, but it gives you very good insights and insights about how customers think of products, how they behave with products. So that really helps in user experience and the whole how should you market your product.
Okay. So Krishnan, your recommendations?
So the one I like to read a decent bit, but the one book which really helped me understand the Indian space specifically is a book called The Golden Tap. It's by Kashyap Diora. It was released a little about a year ago. It was very good to help understand how the Indian ecospace works, how the Indian startups work, why is a Flipkart getting so much funding, why was it successful, all that. So that is one book I would recommend. There's another book, and we're talking about books which are non-technical because those are the areas which we were not too aware of. The other book which I found really inspirational was the book by the founder of Nike. It's called The Shoe Dog by Philip Knight. Really good. And lastly, startups are about communication, are about communicating your idea clearly. So the book which helped me with this is by Chip and Dan Heath. The book's name is Why Some Things Stick and Others Don't. Right, it's just about the Velcro in your mind.
Right. Okay, great. We will link all those on the show notes, and I've also tried to check out some of these books myself. And in terms of from a employee's resource perspective, do you have any technical sites or anything that you can recommend? What should employees do in order to enhance their coding skills or whatever?
I think the number one thing is to stay aware of what's happening in the industry, right? And that, for good or for bad, we use Twitter. So if you follow the right technologies, if you follow the leaders in the industry from a technology perspective, this could be just people like the Stack Overflow guys, or even following good publications like Stack Overflow, TechCrunch and all that, gives you good insight into what's going on. And to learn fundamentals, there are lots of courses nowadays available, and when we get code submissions which are really poor, we always direct them to the Headstrong series. So that's what we do.
Oh, sorry, what's it called?
Head first.
Head first.
Head first.
Yeah.
Yes.
Head
Okay.
first.
It's a.
So they cover the fundamentals of software development.
Okay.
So there's a Head First Oops book.
Head
There's
First
a
Java.
Head First Java.
Okay. It's like a dummies type of book, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what about your recommendation in terms of staying active on, let's say, Stack Overflow, GitHub, maybe contributing to some open source projects, Linux and things like that? Do you think that's key? That's important? Not important?
Definitely, in the sense that it shows how proactive you are, what you've done outside of work, how interested are you in keeping yourself up to date with, say, latest technologies, because you could have done some playing around with some tech that is on your GitHub repository.
Right.
So,
And the beauty about software development and technology in general is it's a community.
Right.
So it's important that you contribute back to it.
Right, and you learn from
Exactly.
You can learn from a person sitting halfway across the globe,
Exactly.
right? And,
Absolutely.
so I just have one final question, but before we go to that, obviously people can reach out to you guys via GeekTrust.in and try out the coding challenges. I looked at the problems, I was scared, so I did not. But I'm sure the techies in our audience will be more adventurous.
And Ram, we also, even if you're not looking out, right, we give feedback to people. And a lot of people, right, they take the feedback and they improve their code.
Right.
And it gives us joy as well that we're able to contribute to somebody's progress in their career.
Right. Okay. Excellent. So that is in terms of the company as such. But personally, if people want to get in touch with you guys, are you active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook? What's email? What's the best way to reach out to you? Some founders might want to talk to you, bounce off some ideas.
Sure. So we are active on Twitter. So as company, we are at the GeekTrust, and personally, I'm at Krishnan Nair.
I'm at Sneha Jain 88 on Twitter.
Okay, I'll link those.
Yeah, and mail, you can reach any of us, founders@geektrust.in.
Founders@geektrust.in.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I'll link those up on the show notes. So my final question is, this is how I end all my interviews. So if there is one gyan with regards to startup hiring, what would that be? Just one gyan. So I'd like each of you to answer it. So you can't point to each other.
So from my point of view, if I had to just give one gyan, and in terms of startup hiring, that would be give every candidate a good experience. So even if you don't hire them, or even if you don't like them, give them a good experience. Take them out on a coffee or meet them in person.
Right.
They will remember you. They will remember your startup for that, and that will help you a long way in building your brand.
Right. Excellent advice, Nair.
I don't think I can beat that, but I would say that don't be too early to judge. Right? We have some of the best people working at some of the startups we're working with didn't have a great start to their interview process. But if you give them time, right, people do wonders. So don't judge early.
Right. People might just be nervous and
Exactly.
not used when you put them on the spot. They might hesitate and stumble. So give them adequate time.
Yes.
So interview should be like a conversation, right? It shouldn't be like, okay, I'm going to hire this, so I hold up all the cards.
And people, I think people trust their instincts too much. In 5 minutes, they feel they can make a decision. That is not true. The first 5 minutes, when you're in a situation where you're being interviewed, you're nervous. So give them time, make them comfortable, and then judge them in the next 2 to 3 hours. Don't judge up front.
Right. Okay. Excellent advice, guys. Thank you so much for your time. Great. It was a pleasure chatting with you guys.
Same here, Ram. Same here. It was nice talking to you.
Wish you continued luck and success. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for today, folks. Hope you enjoyed the show. Do check out foundersgyan.com/EP63 for the show notes, and foundersgyan.com for all our archives, that is 62 episodes. Do leave a comment and or review so that we can improve the show. See you next week with yet another startup and an actionable item that you can implement in your own startup. Until then, it's adios from me here. Enjoy the rest of your week.